I found out Jim Carrey was leaving Twitter. I'm like, I didn't know Jim Carrey was on Twitter.
I mean, we're trying to apply the rules consistently at Twitter so that, the NPR thing is like, well, if we're going to call some media state affiliated, well, there's plenty of media organizations in the U.S. or in the West that are state affiliated. So then we should apply the label equally. And then they got very upset about that. And said that state affiliated implies that the state has editorial authority of an influence over the content. I'm like, so you're saying you don't have that?
Right.
How self-aware are you?
It was on their website.
Well, yeah. I mean, NPR literally on their own website said, government funding is essential to their operation.
Right. You want to see Twitter be a place where truth prevails through debate, right? Where people can actually go back and forth rather than you having somebody from the top down deciding this is what's true and this is what everybody needs to believe, and in lockstep unison putting that out there and silencing it and stamping out everybody else.
I'm watching it closely to make sure, because as community notes gains credibility, the value of gaming it increases. So we got to make sure that it is as ungameable as possible. But I think we're succeeding if Twitter is the place where you can get the most accurate, the closest to the truth, and different perspectives on the truth, to the degree that it's subjective. So the aspiration here for X/Twitter is to be, I would call it the least untruthful place on the internet. Like, we should acknowledge that there will be things that are untrue on the platform, but we'd like to be the least untrue of any place. So the aspiration here for X/Twitter is to be, I would call it the least untruthful place on the internet. Like, we should acknowledge that there will be things that are untrue on the platform, but we'd like to be the least untrue of any place. But I think we're succeeding if Twitter is the place where you can get the most accurate, the closest to the truth, and different perspectives on the truth, to the degree that it's subjective. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's reasonable for an advertiser to decide what content they appear next to. We'll make sure that their ad doesn't appear next to something controversial or whatever they consider controversial. So, I mean, some things are fairly obvious. Like, you don't want, say, a kid's movie showing up next to some racy content of some kind, like, NSFW stuff. Or come visit Disneyland next to dead bodies in Ukraine.
Right.
It's like, it's reasonable to have these adjacency controls. Just like, advertisers could pick a particular time of day to advertise. I think something that I think would be very powerful is to say that all social media companies have to open source their algorithms, so that at least it's known what they're suppressing, and they can't secretly suppress things.
Right.
There's a massive amount of secret suppression going on Facebook, Google, Instagram. Massive. It's just nonstop secret suppression.
And there was at Twitter.
And yeah, absolutely.
But not anymore, right?
Right. Every civilization has a lifespan.
About how many years do you think we got left?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of late-stage civilization vibes these days.
Yeah. Seriously.
Seriously. I don't know, man. There's so many wild cards. The short term we've got. We had the financial crisis, probably some economic thing, but whatever. Those things happen from time to time. But we've got some geopolitical wild cards with Ukraine and Taiwan, and then AI, which is called it's called the singularity for a reason, like, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Community Notes will help us with that one.
Yeah, Community Notes is being pretty good. I'm watching it closely to make sure, because as community notes gains credibility, the value of gaming it increases. So we got to make sure that it is as ungameable as possible. I mean, you may know this, but the essential idea behind community notes is that a note is only shown if it is rated highly by people who historically have different opinions.
Mm-hmm.
So where do people who would normally disagree agree?
Yeah. Just going off of what was in the news.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out, how to run this place and what was going on. And it's very difficult when the whole company works from home. So, it's like, who do you even Zoom with,
Right.
Like, I don't know. It's like normally you could walk around, introduce yourself to people and have conversations, but Twitter had gone to almost fully work from home. So this building was empty. And Twitter buildings around the world were empty. So it was just very difficult actually just trying to understand what was going on.
And so, like, the trust and safety team and everybody were they arguing with you about that, pushing back on that?
Because of the high price of the acquisition, which is very foolishly high on my part, there's $12.5 billion of debt, and debt servicing is $1.5 billion. So, and then there's a cyclic decline in advertising that seemed to start maybe around May of this year, but was pretty significant. That's what you saw Facebook and Google and others also do some layoffs as a result. So there's a cyclic decline in advertising, and then a pretty major pause in advertising where advertisers they just put their campaigns on pause. They didn't definitively say no. I mean, in a few cases they did, but most.
We were, banned from Twitter in March 2022.
No White Claw?
You restored us and a bunch of other accounts in November 2022.
Not merely at the gate, they're through the gate and pillaging the merch. We're in and we're pillaging the merch.
So you came in, though, and you said, bring back the Babylon Bee, bring back these accounts. Like, didn't you get pushback internally?
I mean, it was chaos in the beginning. And it's very difficult when the whole company works from home. So it was just very difficult actually just trying to understand what was going on. I'd say it was like, organizational structure was like Swiss cheese that you put in the microwave. The intent is to maximize unregretted user time. Well, I guess it matters what content is on a system to be recommended in the first place.
Okay.
The thing is that it is contrary to my prediction of the most entertaining outcome is the most likely.
Yeah.
You may have heard me say that, like this Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is most likely. My friend Jonah has this, his theory is the most ironic explanation is most likely, and then my variant is the most entertaining outcome is the most likely, as viewed from a third party who's not in the show. So you could be watching a World War I movie where people are getting blown to bits, and you're just having a soda and popcorn. It's fine. But it's rough for the people getting blown up by cannon shells.
Right.
We're in there getting blown up by cannon shells, and it's whatever or a very good thing happening.
Coming to the Twitter headquarters, we were banned from Twitter in March 2022.
No White Claw?
You restored us and a bunch of other accounts in November 2022, and then now we're invited and we get to come here, and we weren't even allowed to go into our account.
Absolutely, it's like barbarians storming the barbarians. Not merely at the gate, they're through the gate and pillaging the merch. Yeah. That's what we were doing. Merch pillaging. We're in and we're pillaging the merch.
You're the barbarian.
Yes.
Just making sure.
But you're my barbarian friends.
Okay.
I want to ask about that. So the restoring of accounts.
Yes.
When you came in, so you took over, you closed the deal. There was the lawsuit. There was all that. There was the drama. What was the conversation behind the scene around restoring accounts?
There were a few questions around why I was carrying a sink.
Wait, where is the sink?
I've still run into people who don't actually. They asked me, why did you walk into the lobby with a sink? Because they didn't understand I was making a pun. Let that sink in. I felt like if I showed up with a sink, they'd have to let me in.
Right.
because you can't help but let that sink in. It's impossible. Seems like the perfect Halloween, costume.
Yeah.
If you want, presuming you want to get into people's houses.
Yeah. That's hysterical.
And we just really need to complete writing the software for figuring out like what ads were associated with what content, and then figure out like some reasonable revenue share. And yeah, so I mean, I think it's reasonable for an advertiser to decide what content they appear next to. We'll make sure that their ad doesn't appear next to something controversial or whatever they consider controversial. We have those controls in place for the advertisers, and we said like, look, there's freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach necessarily.
That trumps even advertising revenue, in your view, if you're willing to lose money to be able to personally speak freely. Then
and then AI, which is called it's called the singularity for a reason. Like,
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of times people that are in tech are pushing these things forward without any guardrails or consideration, for what could go wrong, despite all the cautionary tales.
how do you regulate AI, for example?
so at least it's known what they're suppressing, and they can't secretly suppress things.
Right. That would be a law that requires open source, that if you're going to censor, you better do it transparently.
Yeah, the thing is that it really doesn't take much to sort of censor something. So there's a lot of censorship that goes on at Google that people don't realize, because all that needs to happen is just move that link to page 5.
Right.
I mean, the thing about the old joke about Google is like, what's the best place to hide a dead body?